Welcome to Gaga's Fiction. Today, we dive into What If Naruto Went to Justice League, Part 1. Subscribe for a unique crossover adventure. It was nighttime. In a dark cave, there was a cage hanging over a lava pit. Nearby, there were two guards, two beautiful women with armor, spears, and shields. They were identical, both had black hair, tan skin, and enviable figures. They were focused on their prisoner. "You're a good listener. You must want to know my story," said the prisoner. He was a young blonde with blue eyes, maybe 17 or 18 years old, slim, and with compact muscles. He was only wearing tattered orange pants and had a dark headband with a metal plate on his forehead. What was most unusual were the marks on his cheeks that resembled those of a cat. "Could you be quiet? If you keep going, you'll end up like the one you're talking to," grumbled one of the guards, furrowing her brow at the prisoner, who ignored her. "Don't listen to them, Wilson," said the blonde, crawling to the cell's bars and placing his arms on the skeleton's shoulders. Without paying it much attention, the blonde continued talking to the skeleton. "You must be wondering how I, Uzumaki Naruto, war hero, disciple of the great Jiraiya, also known as Uro Sennin, and the host of Kurama and other things, ended up as a prisoner of these crazy warriors. Hey!" he growled when a rock hit him on the head, thrown by one of the twins who fist bumped. "Watch your tongue, or we'll cut it off," threatened one of the women, raising her sword and pointing it at Naruto, who just sighed and nodded at the skeleton. "Yes, Wilson, as I was saying, you'll be surprised. I traveled to another dimension," he said seriously. At this explanation, the skeleton's jaw dropped. Smiling, the blonde put the jaw back on his companion's skull. "See, I told you it would surprise you. Now, I'll tell you how I became friends with a giant nine-tailed fox. It's been 2 days, and this guy hasn't stopped talking to that thing. I told them we should clean the cages, but no," complained the irritated black-haired woman, rubbing her forehead with exhaustion. Listening to the senseless stories was tedious. "I know, sister, just ignore him," said the woman next to her, who stared off into space while keeping guard. But they were interrupted from their thoughts when they heard a cup being banged against the bars. "What the heck is wrong with you now?" she shouted, only to be slapped in the face by a skeletal hand. "Wilson, that wasn't right," Naruto said, controlling the skeleton like a puppet. The skeleton shrugged and continued moving the cup between the bars, controlled by the blonde. "Naruto-sama, you must escape from here, you must be free," were the words of the skeleton, moving its jaw. The blonde took a thoughtful pose, then sighed. "Yes, Wilson, I could, but my chakra is very low, and since Kurama is asleep, it'll be a few weeks before I can use my chakra again," he explained to his cellmate, who nodded. "For the love of Hera. I've had enough," said one of the guards, pulling a chain by her side. The cage instantly opened, causing Naruto and the skeleton to fall into the lava pit. However, the blonde had a chain on his ankle that prevented him from falling to his death, but the skeleton wasn't so lucky. "Wilson!" the blonde shouted dramatically as he hung upside down. A tear fell from his right eye as he watched the skeleton dissolve in the lava. "Well, that's that," he said nonchalantly as the guards caught him by the arms and dragged him away. After a few minutes, he arrived at a grand palace. Once inside, he was taken to a chamber filled with angry women who glared at him as he entered. On the throne sat a beautiful blonde woman with dark eyes, wearing golden armor and a crown. Next to her was a 9-year-old girl with dark hair and celestial eyes. The girl watched with concern as the blonde was roughly thrown into the middle of the room. "This is so uncomfortable. Do I at least get a lawyer?" nervously asked Uzumaki as he stood up, only to be forced to his knees as 4 women pointed their spears at his throat. He sighed wearily. "I guess that's a no." "How did you get here?" asked the queen, standing up and approaching to look into Naruto's eyes. "He was bound by a golden rope. If you refuse to speak, we will kill you," she threatened seriously as she unsheathed her sword, pointing it at the blonde, who only glanced at the girl behind the queen. She saw everything. Before he could continue, he was punched by one of the guards. "Don't even think about looking at her," she threatened. However, she was interrupted by the queen, who raised her hand. She looked at the girl, who became the center of attention. Nervously, the girl looked down, took a deep breath, and took a step forward. Okay. Flashback. These Amazons were a race of immortal superwomen who lived on the magical Paradise Island. Created and favored by Aphrodite, the goddess of love, the Amazons thrived in peace for centuries but remained isolated from the world of men. In the days of ancient Greece, many centuries ago, the Amazons were the most powerful nation in the world. In Amazonia, women ruled, and everything was well. Then, one day, Hercules, the strongest man in the world, wounded by taunts that he couldn't conquer the Amazon women, selected his strongest, most ferocious warriors and landed on the shores of the Amazons. The queen of the Amazons, Hippolyta, met Hercules in personal combat because she knew that with her magical girdle, a gift from Aphrodite, the goddess of love, she could not be defeated. Hippolyta defeated Hercules, but through deceit, Hercules managed to secure Hippolyta's magical girdle, and soon the Amazons were enslaved. Angry with Hippolyta for succumbing to the trickery of men, Aphrodite did nothing to help them. Eventually, the Amazons could no longer bear their submission to men, and Hippolyta appealed to the goddess Aphrodite again. This time, it was not in vain because Aphrodite relented, and with her help, Hippolyta reclaimed and stole Hercules' magical girdle. With the magical girdle in Hippolyta's possession, the Amazons took a long time to overcome their masters. They seized all their ships and sailed to another shore because Aphrodite's condition was to leave the world of men and establish a new world of their own. Aphrodite also decreed that they must always wear the heavy bracelets made by their captors as a reminder to stay away from men. And so, after sailing the seas for many days and nights, the Amazons found Paradise Island and settled there to build a new world. With its fertile volcanic soil, wondrous flora and fauna, and abundant natural resources, there was no need, no sickness, no hatred, and no wars. The Amazons would remain eternally youthful as long as they stayed on Paradise Island, where they had access to their fountain of eternal youth, and Hippolyta retained the magical girdle, as long as they did not allow themselves to be deceived by men to avoid subjugation. Just after the Amazons defeated Hercules and sailed to their island, Athena, the goddess of wisdom, gave them the magic sphere. Through this device, Hippolyta could see events in the world of men from the present and the past, and sometimes even predict the future. With visions of the future seen through the magic sphere, the Amazons were able to surpass the inventions of human civilization. Wow! Were Diana's words as she closed the book. It had been given to her by Antiope, who told her she was ready to know the true history of the Amazons. Smiling, she stood up. She was on a hill where the wind was blowing gently. Her mother had told her to go play, as she wasn't yet ready to train with her Amazon sisters. Sighing, she put the book in her bag and stretched. She noticed that it was dawning. However, when she saw a strange light on the beach, she followed it. As she got closer, climbing a hill near the beach, she saw a circle forming. Suddenly, something emerged, causing the little girl to be scared and stumble. With horror, she saw that she fell from the cliff, and it was a great fall that her small body wouldn't survive. Closing her eyes, she waited for the impact that never came. Slowly, she opened her eyes to see that she had been caught by someone. Curiously, she saw that it was like a woman but strangely very different. Could this be a man like the one in the books? She thought, scared. Her mother and sisters had always told her how dangerous they were. "Are you okay?" was the question that pulled Diana out of her thoughts. She was slowly lowered to the ground. She looked at the man in front of her, insecure, only to gasp in horror when she saw how injured he was. Blood was coming from his forehead and mouth, and he had many cuts and bruises all over his body. "I'm Diana," she said in a low tone. "Are you okay?" "I can get you help," she said, this time with concern, looking at the state of the blond man who just sighed tiredly as he fell back, now sitting on the sand, looking around. "I'll be fine. Do you know them?" he asked, seeing women in the distance riding horses. But the blond man couldn't say much more as he fell unconscious on the sand, hearing the furious shouts of the women who captured him. End of flashback. Hippolyta took a deep breath and looked back at her prisoner, who was strangely calm. He had done nothing wrong. In fact, he had saved her precious daughter Diana. Looking at her Amazon sisters, she saw the doubt in their eyes too. Perhaps they hated men, but that couldn't cloud their judgment. Sighing, she raised her hand. "Lower your weapons." "He's innocent," she quickly ordered. Several protested and demanded the execution of the blonde who was still tied up by the golden rope, but all objections were silenced by the stern look of their queen. "However, you will be asked to leave and never return." "I'm sorry, but I can't," denied the Uzumaki, who remained kneeling. Some of the Amazons became annoyed. They had offered him his freedom, and now he refused. It was unheard of. Surprisingly, the queen had a quizzical look. "Why would you stay?" she asked, sheathing her sword and crossing her arms. Diana stood by her side, holding onto her skirt. The little black-haired girl still seemed curious about the man. "I just want peace. And this place. I can sense people's emotions, and hardly any of you have malice." This unsettled the Amazons. The ability to sense emotions was dangerous. "I left my home in search of peace. I only ask that you let me stay. Allow me to make this my home, and I swear by my Nindo that I will protect your people and your village with my life, he said seriously, looking into Hippolyta's eyes, which saw no doubt or lies in his words. Mama, he seems to be good. Besides, this island was meant for people to live in peace and be happy. I think it's right to let him stay, said the little black-haired girl, looking at her mother, who continued to assess the situation. You're not seriously considering it, are you? Came the harsh question from Appolita, a tall woman resembling the queen, but with darker hair tied in a braid. She had an hourglass figure, with D-cup breasts, a small waist, and broad hips. She wore a gray and gold armor. The woman looked at her queen and sister with severity. She didn't trust men, her people had suffered too much at their hands. Hippolyta only looked at her most reliable general with concentration. This was a significant decision, no man had ever lived in these lands. Yet something within her said that this was the right thing to do. You may stay, this caused the angry shouts of everyone in the room. However, no one expected a strong thud on the ground that shattered the stone beneath their feet. All fell silent as they saw the display of strength from the blonde who raised his sword again. Silence. But if you dare to step out of line, you'll suffer the worst of hells. I can swear that by Hera, she finished her threat, and the lasso of truth was removed from the blonde who stood up, smiling and stretching, trying to ignore the women's hateful glares. Thank you. I'll settle far from the city to not disturb or inconvenience you, he said, turning to leave. The women all moved aside as if he were diseased, which didn't sit well with Diana, who frowned. When she was about to follow him, her wrist was grabbed by her mother. Diana, I know what you're thinking. Stay away from him. But mother, he seems good. He might even be a new friend, she said somewhat excitedly. She was a curious and outgoing girl, excited by the prospect of meeting a man. She could learn a lot from him, even about the outside world. However, her spirits were crushed by her mother's serious face. My dear, I can't stop you from approaching him because I know you won't listen to me. Just be careful, she advised, releasing her daughter's wrist. Surprised, Diana nodded. Smiling, she followed the blonde, who was already outside the castle. What are you doing? Came Antiope's question as she looked at her sister, who simply sat back on her throne. Everyone, leave, ordered the general, crossing her arms in annoyance. She would never trust a man, never again. Lady Athena advised me to be careful, her sister replied, looking down at her. Lady Athena told me that my hatred for men shouldn't blind me. Dark times are coming. That boy, I don't know, something tells me he will be a valuable ally and maybe even a friend, she said calmly, sighing. Her sister simply turned her back and began to leave the castle, but not before stopping at the door and looking at Hippolyta. I don't trust the gods. Much less a man, she said, leaving her sister alone on her throne. Sighing, she looked at her hands. It was October 10, 1995, on the human calendar. Troubled and dangerous times were approaching. All she could do was pray to Gaia for the protection of her people. Naruto asked Diana with a smile as they walked together, won't your mom be angry that you're here? Diana, also smiling, replied, no, she gave me permission, and I also want to know more about you. She searched in her bag for a book and a pen. They were walking in a field, heading to an unoccupied part of the island. Obviously, Naruto was the center of attention for the women who looked at him with resentment and even hatred. Naruto asked, there's not much you'd want to know about me. Where are all the children? He noticed that the younger girls were only teenagers over 18 years old, which was strange. Diana looked discouraged upon hearing his question. Well, I'm the only child on the island. I don't know where the babies come from, but my mother told me that only every few decades, we are blessed with a new sister who comes from the sea, brought by the ocean or something like that, Diana explained vaguely. This puzzled Naruto because, since all the women had babies, how they came to be wasn't important now. I see. This seems like a good place, Naruto said, looking interested at a large green meadow with a few trees. Nearby, there was a river running through the area. Breathing deeply, he sat on the grass, surprising Diana with his peaceful expression. What are you doing? Diana asked innocently, watching him with closed eyes and a serene expression. Meditating, Naruto said calmly, smiling. This place was incredible, not even on the Mount Myaboku did he feel such peace. Breathing deeply, he sensed the scent of nature. Opening his eyes slightly, he saw the girl imitating him. With a gentle smile, he advised, just clear your mind and feel everything around you, the wind, the flowing water, the sound of animals. For several minutes, they both remained still, meditating. Naruto stood up, surprised to see the girl still immobile. That was until he heard a small snore, The girl had fallen asleep. Smirking slightly, Naruto lifted the rock where the girl had been sitting. He walked to the river and threw it in. "Hey!" Diana yelled as she quickly emerged from the water, glaring at Naruto. He laughed, unperturbed. Annoyed, she picked up a small rock and threw it at Naruto's head. He caught it with a swift movement, leaving her admirably surprised. "Cool. I know. We've played enough. I need some things. Where's the nearest store?" Naruto asked the girl, who thought for a moment. They were soon seen walking through the village, where the women continued with their activities. They reached a shop and entered, where they were promptly attended by a smiling young brunette, although her smile faltered a bit when she saw Naruto. "What do you need?" she asked politely. "Hello, I need all of this, please," Naruto said, handing the woman a list she carefully reviewed. She nodded and quickly calculated the cost. "It will be around 100 gold pieces." Before she could finish, a large block of gold fell on her counter. Surprised, she inspected the precious metal, which seemed to weigh over 8 kilograms and appeared genuine. Both girls looked at the smiling Naruto, who shrugged. "Well, your order will be sent to your location. The change is." "Nah, that's your tip. Let's go, Diana-chan. We still have more things to find," Naruto said, followed by the girls' agreement. They left behind a surprised woman who shook her head and smiled at the list. "All right, these are apples and oranges," the little girl said cheerfully while eating an apple. She carefully took out the seeds and placed them in a small bag with other seeds. She ran to Naruto, who was carrying logs. Her task was to gather seeds from various plants while Naruto continued cutting logs for their home. Taking a shovel from his long shopping list, he started digging for what would be the foundation of their new home. "Great job. Now, just plant the seeds nearby, and I'll keep going," he said as he continued digging. Happy to help, the girl followed his instructions. After a few minutes, she finished. "I'm done," she said as she stood up. She was surprised to see Naruto digging with strength, pulling up a large amount of firm soil in seconds. "Wow, Aunt Apolita told me that we Amazons were naturally strong, but I didn't know men were strong too," she said excitedly as she walked on the freshly finished land. "Well, let's say I'm unique," commented Uzumaki as he wiped the sweat from his brow. He put the shovel aside and started building his home, with little Diana helping him by passing nails and small pieces of wood. For a moment, the blonde man gazed at the young girl as she carried a large piece of wood that would be part of the roof. He wondered, "They're strong. I wonder how strong these women are." As hours passed, it was already night. You could see Naruto's cabin completed. He sat on a log, grilling some fish over a campfire. Next to him sat a tired Diana, eyeing the fish hungrily as they neared completion. However, she felt her hair being ruffled and tousled by a smiling Naruto. "Thank you for all your help, Diana-chan. I'm glad to have some company," he said calmly as he gazed back at the fire, a peaceful expression on his face as he tended to the flames. "You're welcome. That's what friends are for," the little girl replied cheerfully as she received her fish. She began eating it quickly, with Naruto following suit, eating calmly. "What are you, Naruto? You know, in the past?" she asked curiously. At her question, Naruto tensed up. He sighed and placed 2 more fish on the fire. "Well, I used to be a ninja," he said somewhat solemnly. From his pocket, he pulled out a metallic headband with the distinctive leaf symbol engraved on it. He carefully placed it in the girl's hands, and she looked curiously at the headband, remembering that she had read about ninjas. "You're an assassin. You've killed people," she whispered softly. This made Naruto feel a heaviness in his chest. It was tough to hear such words from a little girl. "Yes, I did it to protect my friends and what I considered my family," he admitted while looking at the girl, who was gazing back at him. "Sometimes, we find ourselves in situations where we have to choose, either to kill the person causing harm or let them continue hurting innocent people," he said, this time with a more serious expression. The girl lowered her gaze to the fire. "There must be another way," the little girl whispered. She stood up to look at Naruto with determination. He was intrigued by her resolve. "I will save people and fight those who want to hurt them, but I won't kill. That won't make me any better than them," she said firmly, surprising Naruto, who could only manage a weak smile. "That's a great goal. I hope you achieve it. Come on, I'll take you home," Naruto said. With that, he carried the girl on his back and, running at great speed, leapt through the trees and hills to reach the castle. Upon arrival, he saw the guards, who let him pass without question. In a large room, they were received by Hippolyta, who had a serious expression. Antiope was by her side and approached Naruto to take Diana and lead her away. She's a good kid, Naruto said to the queen, who nodded in agreement. She is. I need to talk to you. I was about to say the same. Since I arrived, it seems like everyone wants me dead. And since you arrived, the gods have been restless. Tell me your full story, and I will tell you ours. Saying this, Naruto nodded, and the two walked to a more private room. Preview. Amazon against Shinobi, interesting, Antiope said as she took her shield and sword. She stood in front of Naruto, who simply pulled out a kunai. They were on a battlefield. This will be fun, Naruto said. He charged at the Amazon, and she followed his lead, clashing their metal weapons and creating sparks with their powerful strikes. All the Amazons looked furiously at the giant man standing at the castle gates. He walked toward a young black-haired teenager who didn't back down. However, the giant's path was interrupted by someone. So, you're Hercules, Naruto affirmed in the presence of the demigod, who smiled arrogantly. And you're my next victim. Chapter 2, Shinobi. Part 1. It was a big room with paintings on the walls, showing bits of what once was the history of the Amazons. The room was decorated with gold and other treasures. In the center, there was a crystal sphere showing how several women landed on a beach. This is how we arrived here. This is our paradise, away from any harm from men, Hippolyta said, no longer wearing her armor or crown. She was now in a white tunic with golden details. Facing her was a serious Naruto, who gazed at the sphere still displaying how the Amazons thrived in their new home. I see why they want me dead. They've suffered a lot under the hands of men, said Uzumaki, sighing. This world wasn't any better than his. So, it's been almost 2,000 years since you've been here. You're immortal? He asked curiously, noticing that despite her age, the queen didn't seem to be more than 25. The woman shook her head, not exactly, we just don't age. That's why we can die in battles or from strong poisons, but aging to death for an Amazon is impossible, she explained calmly. Suddenly, the atmosphere grew heavier, and the queen looked at Naruto with a serious expression. I've told you our story, now I need to hear yours, she requested seriously. They agreed to share their stories to possibly form an alliance. All right. I need you to trust me, he asked as he approached the queen, who tensed up. Extending his fist, Naruto pointed at the woman, who imitated the gesture, and a voice resonated as their fists collided. Hippolyta felt a tug, and then everything went dark. Flashback. It was nighttime, and the red moon illuminated the sky. The ground bore the marks of a great battle, and now massive roots were visible, each hanging thousands of cocoons. These roots extended endlessly across the terrain. Now! Naruto shouted, his Ashura mode activated. He successfully connected his right hand with their enemy, Kaguya. On the left, Sasuke connected his palm to the goddess rabbit, and above them, Sakura delivered a powerful blow to Kaguya's back. Well done, Team 7, Kakashi said, having lost his Susanoo given by Obito. However, no one saw the dark smile on Kaguya's face. Gradually, white bones began to form around her body. Naruto opened his eyes in fear and was about to shout a warning, but it was too late. All of you. You'll regret challenging me. Kaguya's mad cry unleashed hundreds of bones from her body. Everyone tried in vain to dodge the projectiles. Naruto barely managed to use the truth-seeking balls to save himself. He fell to the ground with a crash and, as he got up, he saw rocks rising from the ground to encircle Kaguya, who was lifted into the night sky, slowly forming a new moon. We did it! We did it, he celebrated, only to turn around and see with horror that both Kakashi, Sasuke, and Sakura had several of Kaguya's bones piercing through them. Naruto. Were Sakura's last words before she turned to ashes before his eyes. Next was Kakashi, who looked resigned. Naruto shook his head, giving his final smile to his sensei, and he ran in a futile attempt to stop what was inevitable. Sensei. Naruto desperately tried to catch his teacher, who turned to dust. In panic, he watched as Sasuke fell to his knees, with bones sticking out of his shoulder and stomach. Dobi. Sasuke said, and Naruto saw his own hands beginning to disintegrate. Quickly, he tried to heal Sasuke using his mark, but Sasuke refused, standing up as best as he could and looking at Naruto, who couldn't hold back his tears of frustration. Naruto. Thank you, Sasuke said, then disappeared with a smile on his face. Kneeling, Naruto stared into the darkness. It was silent on that dark night. Hearing footsteps, he saw the 4 Hokages arriving. They had witnessed everything, and in the face of the situation, they could only lower their heads. Minato took a deep breath and approached his son, who remained kneeling. Son, I'm truly sorry, said the fourth Hokage, who knelt beside Naruto. He couldn't even use his arms to embrace his son. I know what you're feeling. The feeling of helplessness. Naruto kept his head down, refusing to look at his father. It's the same feeling I had when I had to seal Kurama inside you. I had to watch Kushina die before my eyes. I had to endure the knowledge that I was leaving my son alone. In a village that would treat him like a monster, were the hard words from Namikaze. He felt a lump in his throat, guilt consuming him even more. I know what you're feeling. I've lost everything, Dad. Now we can't free everyone from the infinite Tsukiyomi. We've lost, Naruto said with anger and frustration. Several loud noises were heard, and the Kijas saw the 9 Baijuas gathered around them. Naruto stood up and pointed around at all the cocoons. Now what? He asked no one in particular. I'm afraid there's nothing more to be done, descendant of Ashura. To everyone's surprise, the sage of the 6 paths appeared before them. His ghostly silhouette was levitating in front of everyone. The only thing I can do is this, looking slightly at his Bijou children, who silently nodded after a few seconds. They all transformed into chakra and merged into Naruto, who grimaced in pain as a burning sensation spread through his body. Are you telling me? It's all. And what about them? Naruto shouted, standing to gesture at the cocoons all around. Furious, he looked at the sage who only lowered his gaze. What do you propose, that I roam the world alone? If only I had been stronger. Not knowing what else to do, he fell to his knees and then sat down. He had never felt so useless in his life. I don't know what to do. He whispered, gazing into nothingness. Starting over. Hashirama stepped forward, taking the floor. You mustn't give up now, young Uzumaki. You can choose to give up and stay here, dwelling on your mistakes, or you can start anew and find the peace you need. He turned to his brother and added, Tobirama, it is still there. You're insane, brother. That will kill him. Everyone was puzzled by the Senju brothers' words. Sighing, the younger Senju looked at those present and explained with utmost seriousness, surprising everyone, listen. In Uzu, the Uzumakas developed a seal. Initially, it was meant to help women and children escape from the terrible fate awaiting them. This seal can send people to another reality. Mito told me they discarded the idea because the seal essentially destroyed people who weren't strong enough. You're crazy. That could kill him. The Sandaime yelled in anger. He wasn't willing to watch his grandson commit such a suicidal act. What else is there, Gigi? Naruto said, looking around. Everything appeared dead and barren. I know it sounds bad. But this world is already lost. If I die, it doesn't mean anything anymore, he said in a hollow tone. Just saying those words hurt him so much, knowing he had let down Uro-Sennin and everyone else. Before his words, Hagoromo just gazed at the sky, knowing that out of all possible futures, this was the worst scenario. I hope you find peace. Farewell, descendant of Ashura, were the last words of the sage of the 6 paths, and he disappeared. All right. Let's go to Uzu. Meanwhile, inside Uzumaki, the Baijuas watched as the 2 Kuramas bumped their fists, slowly merging and gaining a faint orange glow. Kurama grew a little, and heaved a sigh. This is a disaster. The fox spoke gravely, looking down. Our existence led this world to its downfall, he said in a low tone. Kurama. Matatabi exclaimed, warning against blaming each other and burdening themselves with guilt. He's right, everyone looked surprised as Son Goku addressed Kurama specifically. We need to make a change. This happened because we were separated and allowed ourselves to be captured. Remember Father's words. One day, all of you will be together. Someday, you will meet someone who won't see you as monsters or tools. One day, you will be one again. To become a better being, Seiken recited solemnly. They all knew what they had to do. You, Stinky Fox, know what to do, Shukaku spoke this time, and all the beasts, especially Kurama, looked at the one-tailed tanuki. I refuse. What will become of you all? The fox said in annoyance. You have to protect the boy. You're the only one who can bear this burden, Hachibi responded to his older brother's words. Kurama remained silent, and slowly, all the beasts gathered around him, forming a circle. The 9 Baijuas began to shine. Within Naruto's subconscious, everything started to glow, and slowly, all the Baijuas disappeared to merge with Kurama, who had his eyes closed. After a few seconds, an energy cocoon enveloped the fox, and in the midst of darkness, the cocoon began to crack. Finally, it burst, and a being emerged, 10 times larger than Kurama. Its fur was as white as snow, and its claws were as dark as night. Its eyes were still red as blood, with slit pupils. 10 massive tails swayed slowly from side to side. Letting out a low growl, it looked at itself, a single tear rolling down its right eye. Its siblings were gone, and it roared with all its might. All of this occurred within the Uzumaki, which witnessed it all. Sitting in the depths of his mind, Naruto watched as Kurama fell unconscious. It seemed that even for a bijou, the pressure was too much. Naruto approached and gently stroked the beast's head. It couldn't get any worse. For hours, he sat there, comforting the unconscious bijou, not knowing when it would wake up. It seemed he wasn't the only one who had lost everything. You've lost your father. And now your siblings. I'm sorry, Kurama, the shinobi said, resting his forehead on the beast's head. As the days passed, everyone was gathered in a large room filled with scrolls. In the center of the room was the red whirlpool that represented the Uzumakis. The three Kage looked at the Uzumaki, who was sitting in a meditation pose, with Tobirama behind him, rapidly inscribing various seals on the teenager's back. I'll just focus and resist, said the Senju, beginning to form a long sequence of hand seals. Goodbye, son. I hope we'll see you again and you'll tell your mother and me everything you did in that new place, Minato said, and he, along with the other Kage, began to shine. It wasn't difficult for them to cancel the Edo Tensei seal, especially given the freedom they had when Orochimaru summoned them. May the will of fire always burn within you, Naruto, the Sandaime added, and like Hashirama, he remained serious. Finally, the Nidaime finished the hand seals, and at that moment, the Kage separated from their bodies. Their souls left their bodies and witnessed Naruto being dragged into a portal that opened behind him. Goodbye, Naruto bid his final farewell to the Hokage, who disappeared. After being absorbed, he saw nothing but white. That was until he felt the true meaning of pain. The brightness was blinding, and it felt as though his body was subjected to a gravity that crushed his bones. He was cut by thousands of blades, screaming in agony as he saw his hands covered in blood. Yet, his wounds would heal only to be reopened. After several minutes, everything finally stopped. Landing on what appeared to be a beach, he wondered if he had succeeded. However, he couldn't dwell on it for long, as he heard the scream of a young girl. Looking up, he saw a child falling from a cliff, and he quickly ran to catch her. Are you okay? End of flashback. The chamber of the Amazon Queen fell into silence. Slowly, Hippolyta released her fist from Naruto's. Furrowing her brow, she processed everything she had seen. Your world. She couldn't find the words to ease the atmosphere, as she had never experienced anything like it and hoped she never would. I've lost everything. Now I just want peace, Naruto humbly requested, bowing respectfully to the queen. He didn't want to leave this place, he felt too comfortable here, and the peace and tranquility of the island eased his mind. He didn't care about what lay outside. It's all right. I've allowed you to stay, and don't worry, my sisters have grown accustomed to your presence. No, it's not right to force them to be friendly with me. I will earn their respect and friendship, he said calmly, taking a deep breath and smiling. This pleased the queen, as he wasn't seeking anyone's pity. He would earn it. I know you will. A few months later, all the Amazons were in training, engaging in various sparring matches on the training grounds. In the spectators' bench, Diana and Naruto were seated. Naruto had acquired new attire, consisting of dark pants, an orange shirt with a jounin vest featuring multiple pockets, and an orange cape with dark flames along the edges. Strangely, his shinobi headband was missing. Both of them watched in amazement as the Amazons practiced. However, the little girl was upset that she couldn't participate, and this was noticed by the shinobi, who simply smiled. The girl had the same eagerness to fight as all the other Amazons, which was quite normal. Could you train me, Naruto? Was the surprising request from the little girl, who looked at the shinobi with pleading eyes. He knew she would ask that sooner or later. Come on, it will be fun. Please, she begged multiple times, and after a moment's thought, Naruto agreed. All right, he said simply. Let's have a little practice. With that, the shinobi walked to the armory and was greeted by a calm Amazon. As time passed, all the Amazons grew accustomed to his presence. His calm and cheerful demeanor endeared him to the women. You know, Antiope will kill you, right? The woman next to the weapons joked as she handed Diana a lightweight wooden sword. This made Naruto smile nervously. She's in a boring meeting with the queen, so nothing will happen, he said, shrugging. She chuckled, well, you never know. Going to the center of the training arena, he looked at an excited Diana who was practicing sword moves she had seen during her sister's training. All right, you'll see. Without thinking, the young black-haired girl launched her attack. She imitated the movements she had observed in her sister's training. "Come on, stay still," she growled as she continued to attack, but he easily dodged her strikes, which surprised him. "Diana," he tried gently, but she didn't listen. "Diana," he said a bit louder, but the girl kept attacking without stopping. Suddenly, he disarmed her and held her sword. Confused, she watched as Naruto held her sword. But before she could say anything, she felt a strong blow to her head. "Ouch. Hey, what's wrong with you?" she grumbled as she rubbed her head. She was hit again, and she screamed while holding her head. Never let anger control you. In battle, emotions are a double-edged sword, Naruto began to explain, as he handed her back the sword. He was surprised, the girl's speed was at least at a Genon level. The physiology of these women was astonishing. "For now, put your training sword away." "Wow. So I'll become stronger this way," the little girl said excitedly as she held her wooden sword. "Hey, calm down. First, you need to train," Naruto said. Then he took a small scroll from one of his many pockets and placed it on the ground. He summoned some bracelets and anklets with various kanji engraved on them, which were similar to those his friend Rock Lee had once worn. "Put these on." Following his instructions, the girl put them on. "Hey, these are so light," she complained, crossing her arms, but seeing Naruto's playful smile confused her. It was only when she fell on her face that she realized they felt very heavy. She grunted as she struggled to stand. "You have over 100 kilograms in each seal. Now, run around the training field 20 times, which surprised Diana and brought smiles to some Amazons. It seemed the shinobi was tougher than he appeared. "So, what are you waiting for? Run," he said, shooing her away as if she were a dog. "Ugh," the girl sighed as she began to run with the weights on. Naruto watched her, crossing his arms, until he heard footsteps. He turned to see Hippolyta and her sister, who were dressed more formally. Both came to him. "Since when have you been here?" he asked, confused, as he approached the Amazon. "Since you started your interesting speech," Antiope said with a serious tone. She had heard the shinobi's story, and while she felt somewhat sympathetic, she found it hard to trust him completely. "I don't recall allowing this," the queen spoke, crossing her arms. She had overheard his speech on Amazonian culture, but she didn't like that he was training her daughter. "In fact, he's just helping her get stronger. Besides, it's never a bad idea to learn something new," Naruto said nonchalantly, shrugging. This irked the Amazons a bit, but to some extent, he had a point. Their culture had been built by incorporating various aspects from different parts of the world to create their own. Antiope then decided to settle the matter. She went to the armory and removed her clothing, wearing only a short white chemise, which didn't make her sisters uncomfortable, but it did make Naruto blush as he couldn't help but look at the impressive figure of the Amazon general. "It's time to see who is more efficient, an Amazon or a shinobi," she said with a challenging smile as she took one of the armors from the armory. In a few minutes, she had all her equipment, including steel bracelets, anklets, and a breastplate. After adjusting her breastplate and metal skirt, she was ready. She then took a sword, shield, spear, and a bow with arrows. Once she had all her weapons arranged, she stood in front of Naruto. "I accept your challenge, Antiope," Naruto said, placing his hand on his wrist seal. Everyone was surprised when they saw him pull out a pair of ordinary twin katanas. He strapped them to his back, and he was ready. All the Amazons gave him space. Unknowingly, Diana stopped running in the distance to watch the upcoming battle. Chapter 3, Shinobi. Part 2. Hippolyta stood between the two fighters, clearing her throat. She spoke, "All right, this will be a friendly match between Antiope, the leader of the Amazons." As she introduced her, all the Amazons cheered for their sister, who raised her arm in victory. They fell silent when they saw their queen raise her hand and continued, "And Naruto." There was an awkward silence, and Uzumaki crossed his arms, giving a disapproving look to all the Amazons. "Ha ha, that's childish, you know," he complained with a sigh. However, a timid Diana began to clap and cheer loudly. Everyone looked at the young dark-haired girl. "Go, Naruto!" she shouted as loudly as she could while continuing to applaud. The others looked at the little girl in surprise. "I won't disappoint you, my little fan," the blonde said, wiping away imaginary tears. When the fight began, the Amazon warriors' cheers in support of their leader grew louder. "Break his back. Rip off his head. Take out his spine and stick it up his rear." More and more shouts were heard, sending a shiver down the shinobi's spine. Just seeing the dark smile on Antiope's face added to his unease. Pushing aside these thoughts, he adopted a more serious expression. The two opponents faced each other, both smiling as they distanced themselves. The queen and her Amazons watched as the battle began. The Amazon was quick to take the initiative, grabbing her bow and shooting arrows rapidly. Naruto swiftly used his swords to cut down the arrows coming his way, but some grazed him. Sheathed his swords, he ran across the battlefield, dodging the rain of arrows. "Not bad," said Uzumaki, drawing his swords again. Dozens of arrows came at him once more, and he cut or broke them with his blades. Eventually, Antiope ran out of arrows. Smiling, the blonde put away his swords, but when he looked at his chest, he saw 4 arrows embedded in his torso. "Oh, damn. Your arrows are fast." Some of the Amazons watched with disgust and disbelief as Uzumaki removed the arrows from his body with a slight expression of pain. His wounds quickly healed, and without losing his smile, he jumped towards his opponent, who tossed her bow aside and grabbed her spear, hurling it with all her might. Quickly, the blonde had to sidestep to avoid being pierced, only for Antiope to appear in front of him in a moment of carelessness and tackle him with her shield. Skidding backward, the shinobi grunted. This wouldn't be easy. Drawing his swords, he attacked his opponent, who had no trouble keeping up with him using her sword as well. "Careless," Antiope said, using her sword in a quick move to cut Uzumaki's hand, forcing him to release one of his swords. Without hesitation, the Amazon used her shield to strike the second sword, breaking it. Finally, she kicked the blonde's stomach hard, making him fall to his knees. Disappointed, she aimed her sword at Uzumaki, who remained with his head down. "That's it," she said with disappointment, expecting a real challenge. However, seeing the blonde smile, it was too late to retreat. "No, it's not over," he said, leaping to deflect her sword with his hand. Without thinking, he gave her a strong headbutt, causing her to step back. Drawing a kunai from his sleeve, the blonde attacked. Firmly gripping her sword, Antiope also launched an attack. Sparks flew with each blow they exchanged, until, lost in the battle, the Amazon used her shield again to disarm Uzumaki. Without thinking, she stabbed him with her sword. All the Amazons watched in disbelief at the murder. In shock, the woman was about to withdraw her sword when she saw the blonde transform into a log in a puff of smoke. "What?" She could barely finish the question when she received a strong punch to the face, followed by another blow from the other side, and finally a hard uppercut to her chin, which sent her flying several meters before crashing to the ground. Getting up quickly, she looked at them. "All right, guys. Let's show her the Uzumaki style," were the words of the blonde, leading a dozen of his clones who shouted aloud "Hi." "This is impossible," said one of the many Amazons, who watched in amazement. This magic, if you could call it that, left them all in awe. In the distance, Diana had a wide smile on her face. This was the coolest thing she had ever seen. "You're a box full of surprises, Naruto," were Hippolyta's thoughts as she watched the fight. "So, this is what a shinobi can do," Antiope said as she got up, smiling with excitement. It had been a long time since she had an interesting fight. Wiping away the blood trickling from her lip, she prepared herself, striking her shield to defeat one of the copies. Running toward them, they mimicked her movements. She kicked one of them and cut down another man, making both of them disappear. "Do not trust you." One of the many clones grabbed the Amazon's ankles. She threw him to the ground with force, creating a small crater. She kicked the clone holding her, only to feel the remaining clones swarm towards her. In this particular scene, more than 25 blondes surrounded the Amazon. Mumbled a confused clone who noticed that they were all slowly getting up. "Ha!" The Amazon shouted, sending all the clones flying tens of meters away in a burst of strength, making them disappear. Trying to catch her breath, she stuck her sword into the ground. As she looked up, she saw a serious Naruto. "You're strong. But you haven't seen anything yet," he said as his eyelids turned orange, and his eyes transformed to resemble those of a toad. Calmly, he watched the Amazon approach him, running with her sword raised. "Take this!" shouted the woman, about to thrust her sword into Uzumaki's chest. At the last second, everyone saw the sword shattered into 1,000 pieces by the hands of the blonde. He delivered a powerful punch to Antiope's stomach, making her spit saliva and lose her breath from the blow. She was sent flying more than 100 meters away from Naruto, who remained serious. This is Sage Mode. This mode is achieved by gathering nature energy. And here, without a doubt, this mode is much stronger, he said as he stretched his muscles, feeling strangely stronger than usual. It must be because this island is overflowing with natural energy. His words, instead of intimidating his opponent, had the opposite effect. "Ha ha ha. All the Amazons watched in disbelief as Antiope started laughing heartily. She had never laughed before, and hearing her laugh worried some of them. "This is exciting," she said, standing up slowly. She began to remove her armor, revealing her muscles. Once she finished, she stretched her muscles and cracked her knuckles. "It's been centuries since I had so much fun in a fight. Come, Naruto!" she shouted with a thirst for battle. The two opponents stared at each other, and without thinking, they both ran towards each other, letting out a war cry as they collided with their fists, creating a massive shockwave that knocked down some Amazons. Both the Amazon and the shinobi mercilessly attacked each other. Naruto delivered a right hook to Antiope, making her cough up blood, but she refused to fall. She used her right leg to sweep the shinobi off his feet, and without wasting time, she leapt to land on the chest of the blonde with a downward kick. The impact made her opponent bury underground. Without waiting, the blonde woman pulled Naruto out of the ground by his ankle and slammed him into the ground. Sitting on his chest, she began to pummel his face ruthlessly and brutally, but she didn't anticipate the headbutt from Uzumaki that sent her tumbling backward. Both of them slowly got up and locked eyes. Neither of them said anything, but their smiles said it all. In slow motion, they exchanged a right hook, and when their fists connected, they were both sent flying in different directions. Antiope crashed into the nearby trees, while Naruto slammed into a large rock, embedding himself in it. The Amazon witnesses didn't know what to say. This was undoubtedly one of the best battles they had ever witnessed. But to their surprise, both fighters got up and slowly walked toward each other. Finally, when they stood face to face, they looked at each other intensely, but after a few seconds, Antiope collapsed, only to be caught by Naruto. "Good fight," the exhausted Amazon whispered, and Uzumaki chuckled softly. The woman allowed herself to be embraced by the man. "I haven't had this much fun in a long time," she said with a smile, showing the blood running from her mouth. It wasn't unusual for the Amazons to enjoy fights so much, after all, it was in their nature. "Yeah. A friend once told me that people understand each other better using their fists," he said calmly as he got up along with the woman, who held her possibly broken right arm. They looked at each other, both in a sorry state, and couldn't help but laugh softly. Without further ado, they sighed. "He was wise," Antiope replied, touching her completely healed right arm, while Naruto slowly recovered in front of the astonished woman. "Is there anything you can't do?" the woman joked, looking at her fully functional arm. "Well, I'm not good with weapons," he replied, scratching his head in embarrassment. They began to walk toward the Amazons who were running toward them. "Well, I can help with that, as long as you're willing to have more fights like this," offered the Amazon, extending her hand to the shinobi, who didn't hesitate for a second. "It's a deal." Quickly, they were approached by the women who congratulated them on their great battle. In the distance, a determined Diana stood up. "I'll be as strong as you," the young girl said with effort. She began to run and continue her training. This was observed by Hippolyta, who gave a small smile. She then turned to see Uzumaki, who somewhat awkwardly and shyly accepted the compliments from some of the Amazons. "I definitely did the right thing," the queen said to herself. She had no regrets about letting the blonde stay. He was beginning to fit in, and today had been another good day for all the Amazons. It was already nighttime. Somewhere on the island, we see Uzumaki's home. Outside the house, 3 people were gathered around a fire for warmth, and a little girl was sleeping, covered by a blanket given to her by the shinobi. Hippolyta, Antiope, and Naruto watched with tranquility as the girl slept. "It's time, sister," the Amazon general broke the silence, eating a skewer of fish she had taken from the fire. "I know," the queen replied as she started to eat as well. She sighed and gently stroked her daughter's hair, wishing that she could enjoy more of her childhood. "That's why I want to ask the 2 of you to train her." Hippolyta's request surprised both of them. "Agreed," were Antiope's simple words. She had no doubts about the blonde's abilities, and the combination of his fighting style with the Amazon ways could be unstoppable. "Okay," said Naruto, who had no objections. It would be a good distraction. The 3 adults continued to enjoy their meal and the peaceful night. Several years later, everything was quiet on a morning in Paradise Island. All the women started to wake up to attend to their duties. However, no one seemed to pay attention to the explosions coming from the training grounds. Heading there, we could see several explosions shaking the earth. In the middle of the destroyed training field, full of craters and wreckage, there was a teenage girl who now appeared almost like an adult. She had long, dark hair, tan skin, bright blue eyes, a well-developed and toned body with an hourglass figure, and impressive assets. Despite her extraordinary beauty, her condition was quite different. AHG. She groaned as she held her shoulder. She was dressed in armor that was now in tatters and barely covering her, revealing the white fabric beneath. She was badly injured, with blood running down from her forehead and various cuts on her body. The black-haired girl looked at her shattered shield and broken sword, and with a growl, she threw her weapons to the side. She knelt down and took a tired breath. "Congratulations, Diana. You've endured over 72 hours of combat," someone said as they walked up to the teenager. It was Antiope, who was also injured and tired but not as much. Someone else appeared by her side. "I knew you could do it, Dina-chan," said Naruto, who had undergone a significant change in his appearance. He was now 27 years old, a fully grown adult. He had let his hair grow, resembling his father's style. He had reached his final growth spurt and now stood at 1.95 meters. His physique was robust but not exaggerated. His outfit hadn't changed much, with dark pants, an orange t-shirt, a jounin vest with multiple pockets, and an orange cloak with dark flame patterns on the edges. Strangely, his shinobi headband was still missing. The Amazon under her nickname grumbled, "I'm not a kid anymore, sensei." She replied somewhat irritated, but her response was met with Naruto's smile as he ruffled her hair. Unable to resist, Diana smiled too. After a few seconds, Naruto healed her as well. Once on her feet, Diana felt full of energy but also exhausted. Both Naruto and Antiope had taken Diana's training very seriously, and at times, Diana had wanted to give up as it was incredibly demanding. However, Naruto knew how to motivate her, and she gave her all every day. The training involved strengthening Diana through shinobi training to make her stealthier, faster, stronger, and enhance her senses to the fullest. Naruto also shared a secret between him and his teacher, and as for Antiope, she trained Diana in Amazonian weapons and fighting style. "All right, that's enough. We need to go. But first, we need to freshen up," said the Amazon general, noticing their deplorable condition. The three of them left, and a few minutes later, they arrived at the Uzumaki's home. It had a beautiful garden filled with various types of wildflowers. The closest to the house were cherry blossom trees, their pink petals gently falling in the breeze. Further away, there were dozens of trees and plants with different fruits. "Your garden still amazes me, Naruto," Antiope said as she watched the pink petals fall around them. It was truly beautiful. They left all their armor and weapons in front of the house. "Come on, it's still early, and there's dinner tonight," the Amazon general said, draping a towel over her shoulder. Diana and Naruto followed suit, and they walked to a wooden house. Beside the door, a white-furred fox was resting. "Kurama!" Diana shouted as she kneeled beside the animal to scratch its head. The fox accepted the affection while lying on the grass, but when Diana leaned in to kiss it, it growled. "It's one thing to relieve the itch, kiddo, and quite another to get all lovey-dovey," said the serious Bijou, turning away from the Amazon princess to lazily lay down. Diana was annoyed and crossed her arms. "Humph! You're quite the grump," she said and walked away to enter the small house. When Antiope arrived next to the Bijou, she simply patted its head before also going inside. However, when Naruto arrived, he took a moment to sit beside it. "How are you, old friend?" he asked while patting the fox's back. The fox continued to gaze into nothing. Smiling nervously, Naruto began to stroke the fox's head as it peacefully lay on the grass. "It's nice to find such a peaceful place, isn't it?" "Yeah. I must admit it is. You know, you should start a family with her. Time is running out, kid. Even though you're an Uzumaki, I don't give you more than 300 years, the fox said disinterestedly as it moved away from the blonde to stretch. In response, the shinobi nervously smiled. "Well, I don't want to rush things. Having a child is a big step," he said while getting up. Kurama's only response was a snort before it ran off across the meadow. Naruto sighed and made his way into the small house. Suddenly, an orange blur flew over him, and in less than a second, he had pinned the attacker to the ground, holding her arm. Wow, okay. You win," were the words of the attacker in surrender. She turned out to be a beautiful woman with long reddish-orange hair, brown eyes, and tan skin. She had a towel covering her curvy figure. "Artemis, you should give up. The score is 789-0, a mocking voice came from beside the woman on the ground. She appeared to be closely related to the woman named Artemis, the only difference being her hairstyle and dark eyes. The redhead carried several books and had a towel over her shoulder, dressed in the typical white and gold tunic. "Hello, Artemis-chan, Alexa-chan," greeted the blonde, releasing the woman who stood up. Annoyed, she shook herself and quickly entered the wooden house, followed by the Amazon and the ninja. Inside was every man's dream, a large hot spring, covering more than 100 square meters. The place was full of stunning women with almost unreal beauty, each with different skin tones, hair colors, and eye colors. Naruto watched as Diana, Antiope, Alexa, Artemis, and many other Amazons undressed to get into the warm and relaxing waters. Obviously, the ninja blushed briefly. Despite having spent years sharing baths with the Amazons, he still found it hard to believe that they didn't mind sharing their privacy with him. Old Uro-Sennin would have caused chaos or even cut off his own legs just to get in here, he thought with a smile. Calmly, the blonde began to undress, and once he was naked, he entered the water to relax. He sighed, watching the women wash each other or play innocently. Shrugging, he reclined, trying to get some rest, but gentle hands covered his eyes. "Who am I?" asked a seductive voice behind the blonde, sending a pleasant shiver down his spine. "I wonder, who could you be among the more than 1,000 beautiful women?" he asked with a smile. The woman jumped behind him, sitting in his lap. She had short white hair tied in a bun, with a great figure like any Amazon, although not as striking as Artemis or Antiope. Her face was delicate and beautiful, but a large scar on the right side was visible. However, she had both her healthy eyes, thanks to the Uzumaki, who had no trouble regenerating her right eye. In a light-hearted manner, the smiling woman pressed her lips to the blonde's. After a few minutes, they separated, and the serene fair-haired woman leaned against the Uzumaki, who wrapped his arms around her. "Hey, ladies, keep your attention here." The woman grumbled, and she watched as all her sisters quickly averted their gaze. Diana's intense gaze, however, made the white-haired girl smirk playfully. "First Chan, I thought you were working today?" she asked her lover, who simply shrugged. "Well, dear, you know what to do." She stood up for a moment, positioned herself in front of the Uzumaki with her back to him, and sat down. The Amazon rested her back against the blonde's chest, and Naruto slowly began massaging the white-haired woman's shoulders. "Oh, that feels so nice," came the contented sigh from the Amazon, who sighed with pleasure. "Find a private space," Diana exclaimed as she stood up, initially looking annoyed but quickly shifting to embarrassment when she sat back down. Beside her, Antiope sighed wearily. It seemed that the teenager was jealous of the relationship between Persephone and Naruto, which had started 2 years ago. "Good suggestion," saying that, the white-haired woman easily took the blonde and moved him away. The shinobi quickly stood up to bid farewell to his friends, and once they were gone, they heard Alexis's disappointed sigh. "I'm a bit envious," she said as she closed her book and crossed her arms. She was unclothed, showing her remarkable physique. Artemis was next to her, trying to sleep, but upon hearing her sister's words, "Well, you're not the only one," she replied with a smirk as she discreetly watched Diana, who got up in annoyance to grab a towel. Her smirk turned into disbelief when she saw Antiope's small frown and jealous look as she watched the couple leave. "Now, that's unexpected," she said aloud, but to her misfortune, her words were overheard by the Amazon general. "Did you say something?" were the stern words of the blonde, who stared intently at the orange-haired girl, who quickly denied. "I didn't say anything." She wasn't even willing to confront their general. However, she wore an annoyed expression when she heard Alexis's soft laughter. Taking her sister by the arm, she tossed her into the middle of the hot spring. "My books," she lamented as she watched her literature fall into the water.